All right, today is we're going to be going to talk about discipleship here. So this is part one. The title is "Go Therefore and Make Disciples," and we're going to be studying Matthew chapter 8, verse 18 through 22, and also Matthew chapter 28, verse 18 through 20. Let's begin. All right, so there's actually many titles for the um, Matthew chapter 8, verse 12 to 22. This is like an interesting passage here where we're actually going over, and I apologize. The passage is Matthew chapter 8, verse 18 to 22, and for the ESV, um, uh, the NIV, and also the NLT, which is a New Living Translation. The title is "The Costs of Following Jesus." And you'll see that is very similar here. The New King James Version, um, it says that the demands of discipleship. So we see like right away there's some kind of a sacrifice, and also there is things that we have to do to be a disciple. The New Revised Standard Version, it says would be followers of Jesus. So these are people that are trying to follow Jesus, but then they actually are really hesitating. If that makes sense. The NASB, which is the new a new American Standard New American Standard Bible, is discipleship tested, and the Message Bible is Your Business is Life, Not Death. That actually includes the storm as well. So you'll see that there's this portion of like talking about discipleship there, but it's also being tested, as you could imagine there. So let's actually now go into like about disciples. So uh, why did people want to be disciples of Jesus back then? So the word was spreading about Jesus. He was, uh, I mean, all of Jerusalem, all of the people of Jerusalem, like Jewish people, they were definitely, like waiting for the Messiah. So, like this, if you really look at it here, like all over the New Testament, I'm sorry, all of the Old Testament, and especially during the time of Abraham, and then um, God is telling Abraham to, that he's going to be a father of many nations there, and then like chosen, like a specific chosen generation, tribe or nation there. But then it goes on to say that they're going to be a blessing to all the nations there. So their job really was to actually propagate and really really be the evangelists, really be missionaries, if you think about it, to the entire world, spreading the good news of God. Um, and then that actually went to you'll see his son Isaac, same kind of thing. So how did they do it back then? It was mostly by verbal, a lot of stories, and you can see at that time they're talking about creation. They're talking about Noah's flood and whatnot. They're talking about just how was a civilization, how God made everything perfect, and then there's decline, and just how God wants His people um, and the entire world to actually follow Him in His ways. So that's all happening. But then here He is. This entire thing is happening. But then, this message about Jesus is not just for the Jewish people there. I mean, people really, they're so the Roman government is actually, they're ruling over Jerusalem. They're ruling over Israel there. So these people understand. Many of them, they understand about. the Jewish culture and the religion and whatnot. So they're familiar with this. So they're also familiar with the Messiah there. So um, when we get into much later on here, when we're talking about like how Pilate is now facing Jesus there, and once he finds out that he is the Christ, and once he understands, because I mean he understands what that means, I mean he understands to the point that that has a connection to the eternal King from David there. So anyway, and at that time, honestly, he is thinking like, you know what, I need to I need to let let Jesus be freed. But obviously we know the story there. But anyway, so the story, word gets around that Jesus is born. And if you think about our calendar, you got before Christ BC, and then Jesus, the birth of Jesus separates the calendar. BC. If you know the calendar, it goes backwards. So it's going to go like 1600 BC, and it goes backwards all the way to zero. And then from there AD, and that's talking about what is it, like after after Christ, or I'm sorry, during the time of Christ there. So um, and then from there, like zero, that's when our calendar is now fully beginning. So Jesus had a profound impact. But then now, Matthew and Luke talks about the family tree there, and then it just shows clearly that he is the Messiah, the birth. And when you start studying the birth of Jesus here, it's amazing there. And once again, it's a fulfillment, um, and him being born from a virgin. So all of that is prophesied. Simeon is an interesting character. Simeon at the temple. This individual was told that he will not die, until he meets the Messiah. So here he is. He's getting very old, and he's at the temple. And I mean, think about it. He's going to the temple, like seeking to die, if that makes sense, because and he's like, and everybody knows about this here. So like you could imagine that once he sees this Jesus, the Messiah there, and then he prophesies this great thing, and the next day he's no more. So people are probably going, "Where's Simeon? Where's Simeon?" And they probably realize, "Oh, wait, what happened yesterday here? Who was he? Who was the baby that he saw there?" So there's words getting around. Remember the wise men? They came over there to from the east, and these are ancient people that are uh, that are that are known as people that were a group that Daniel made here. And as you know about Daniel's story, there he was actually captured. He was one of the people that was taken to Babylon, and then that realm changed to Persia and whatnot there. But anyway, so this group was taught to wait for for the Messiah, and they did all they were stargazing and whatnot there. So they eventually went to Jerusalem, and then one of the first things they said over there was, "We came to worship." And they didn't know Jesus at that time. I mean, the name Jesus here, but they said that we came to worship that who was born, the King of the Jews. So we see right away, and of course, they meet Jesus there. The star goes over there, and then they're clearly at that time worshiping. So there's a lot of things happening here. So a lot of news happening, and so that was a long time ago. But now we have John the Baptist. So at this time, Jesus is about 30 years old, and then John the Baptist proclaims that Jesus is Christ. Remember, he gets baptized there. This is the beginning of his ministry, and it's interesting how John says this. He says that Jesus is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. So you can see right away, even in that context, that statement there, you can see that that Jesus is going to be a sacrifice for our sins, to take away the sins of the world, because you'll see a whole bunch of context of the lamb and just how the imagery from the sacrifice whatnot in the Old Testament, and he's fulfilling that, and all of this is prophecy. And then really from that time on, from his ministry, and his ministry was about 3.5 years. Every single day there was news. Jesus revealed that he was Christ by his teachings, and he had people were just amazed at his teaching. They knew they were saying that he did not teach like a scribe. He teach with authority there, and then by his authority over diseases, we saw them many times. The affliction. So people think about people that are blind, now they can see. People that are lame, now they can walk. All that kind of stuff. Demons. He was casting out demons left and right, and we just saw like last week that um, there was a demon called Legion. So it was demons in this one individual, and Legion means 6,000 there. So it didn't matter. It doesn't matter, like, if all the demons went against Jesus one time, he's still more powerful there. So they have no power. Disease no power. Affliction no power against Jesus. Their demons no power. But even nature, and we saw that with the storm. So it's clear that all of this is pointing to and giving sign that Jesus is the Messiah, that that he's there, that he is here. So it's it like, I think one of the things I want to say here is that we understand. I think many of you, when you're hearing this message, um, knows about the event that happened in 911. Now, this was back in 2001, so some of you guys were not born at that time, but you know about it, and there's a lot of things that you could read about it. Now, some of us, we were alive at that time, and so we would know exactly what was happening, even though that happened. What is it? Almost 25 years ago. It's interesting that it is so vivid. Why? Because that is what you call the impact event, and you could see that all of these things that's happening are called impact event, and of course Jesus, when he's doing ministry, is like every single day. And then remember what Jesus, like, when he healed someone, he would tell them to go to the priest, go show them, and also offer the sacrifices that is for that given thing, for leprosy, for example, right? And then and you can see that the Jewish leaders are going, what's going on? This is so unusual, because we're having, like left and right, people are coming to us every single. This is a regular now occurrence of people being healed. So they should have known that something was happening. And we do find out in the book of Acts that many of these Pharisees and scribes, they do believe. So let's actually go on. Now, when Jesus saw a crowd around them, he gave orders to go over to the other side. So this is in Matthew chapter 8, verse 18. So I'm going to read this here. Ministry is about doing the will of God by following Jesus. Remember, if you're doing ministry, or if you're planning to do ministry here, it's not your ministry. Even if God calls you to start a nonprofit organization, that's for God. There, it's God. Like that's God's conviction. But especially when you're doing ministry at the church, this is all ministry for God there. So we should focus on that. It's not our ministry. So ministry is about doing the will of God by following Jesus. Each person must respond to Jesus, and that's the people that you're ministering to, and not to us. And I think that's it's an important thing. Many times when we do ministry, it is one of those, like, people will say thankless job in a sense, but I would say the other sense is actually a good thing, that the light is not shining on us, but the light is shining on Jesus. And that's how it's supposed to be. It's not necessarily a thankless job, but it's a job where we're shining the light. We are like the moon that is reflecting the sun. right? Every one of us. And that's not just for leaders in the church here, but that's for all Christians, guys. You know, we're constantly leading people to Christ. And each person will either follow Jesus or not to follow us. It is not our ministry. What we're called to do is to lead people to Christ. So you can see over here that Jesus is telling the crowd and telling the crowd, but also specifically calling the disciples, let's go to the other side. There's more ministry to be done. And this right here was right before they went to the water, and you could see that this was an unusual thing because he is going to the other side, as we discussed last week, to a single man. And this individual had a name there. So ministry is not always about a crowd. And when you study the ministry of Jesus, a lot of times it's just to one person, and I find that very fascinating. But then that one person is, um, um, I will say, through that, through what Jesus has done for that one person, it draws many people. And you probably will see that in your own life, and just sharing your testimony, people seeing the difference in your life, that Jesus has touched you, and then because of you, because of one person, many people are coming to Christ because of that. And I'm sure you've seen that in your own personal life, but also other people's life. Now, I told you that scribes and people, they were affected by the teaching of Jesus and the things that he was doing. This individual, you can see that he believes, And it says over here, and a scribe came up and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So you can see right here that the scribe, um, his saying, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go, sounds great. But we don't know the heart. Remember, Jesus knows the heart. He knows his mind. He knows his heart. He also sees his hesitation. He sees where his comfort level is, and is he able to let go of that? His comfort level, from studying this right here, you can see that his comfort level is the comfort of home, the comfort of like and come on, guys, it's hard to argue that there's a comfort at the house and your own bed, and the same kind of food and the restroom and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's where his comfort level is here. But Jesus is telling him, you have to go beyond your own personal comfort. If you're gonna follow me here, this is what it is. So and think about that. But if you think about, though, it's like there is a weighing option here. Is Jesus worth it? Is he greater than my personal comfort? Is he greater than all the things that I personally want or desire, my own personal goal? Is he greater? Should I follow him? So the scribe is a teacher of the law, that's according to the NIV, expert in Moses teaching, God's words translation. And these are two very good translations, in a sense, the definitions of what a scribe is. Um, and um, and most likely, so we don't know the outcome of of the scribe, but most likely he turns away. Um, we're reminded of the rich young man, and he also turned away. I think there was many people that was they they wanted to follow, but they had impure motives. There was something that was some kind of hesitation, and they walked away. It was very sad, right? You can be talented. Many of you guys are very talented. At a level that is just amazing. And God has blessed you with that talent, and I'm sure you want to give that talent back to God, and you want to do that, and that's great. And some of you guys are very gifted, and gifted meaning like you guys are just amazing It's not just talent there, but then there's a special kind of gift that people can see. It's very, very obvious. And you could even be an expert. You can be like a professor level expert there. Maybe you are a professor at a college and whatnot there, right? But here's the thing. But God is not looking for who you are. No, He's not. Or what you can do. He wants to know if you will follow Him and follow His way. If you make Jesus number one above your life for the rest of your life, you will make sacrifices. So I want you to think about that statement there. If you make Jesus number one, a lot of us, we have all different things, and let's be very honest. We think about ourselves a lot, you know, and many times we are above everything else here. But can you put Jesus first? Can you put Jesus above everything else? Like number two can be different things, right? Your career. God's not telling you to just stop your career, right? But then He's telling you to make your career number two, though. God's not telling you to stop writing that book, or pursuing your talents and gifts and all that kind of stuff. No, no, but make it number two. Make Jesus number one above your life, but for the rest of your life. Now, this language is confusing here because this language implies that you're going to be following Him for the rest of your life. What does that mean? If you say, yeah, this is someone that is more than just a nominal Christian, and the answer is yes, you have to become someone that will follow. Because what did the scribe? What was he really doing? He's like, I want to be a disciple. That's really what he's saying here. But there's a cost involved in it. There's a sacrifice, and you're going to continue to make sacrifices. People are going to, like say, hey, you should do this. You should do that. You should do that because you're talented. You should do it because you're gifted. You should do it because you're an expert at this right here. But we have to weigh that. Go to God in prayer, and make sure that Jesus is number one, and ask God, God, is this what you want me to do? But I'm not going to put that above you, Jesus, right? So is Jesus number one above your life? I really hope so. But if that's the case, and if you answered yes, then you know what? Jesus welcomes you to follow Him. But understand, if you need to stop and take a picture of this right here, screenshot, do that, and try to just really wrestle with this thought here. But I really pray that you will say yes, and you will follow Him correctly here. Jesus welcomes you to follow Him if you do this. Now look at this. Another of the disciples. Now this is disciple. It's an interesting word. We're going to get there. But another disciple said to Him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. This seems like a very cold response. But once again, Jesus sees his hesitation. This individual, you can see that he really cares for other people. You can see that, like he cares for his father. But it's not just his father. He cares for his mom. He cares for his sisters. He cares for, I mean, he is a people person. He is, he's someone that puts people probably before himself. Great. That's awesome here. But there can be a limitation of it. There can be some hesitation. And Jesus sees that. And, he's basically saying, you have to put me above others. Even your own. It seems like a good good intention. It may seem like that, by the way, but then is that going to be above Jesus? Is that above following Jesus? And that's kind of where it is. Once again, Jesus sees the intention, so He's telling him, like hey, basically He's saying, let others handle this, because most likely in this situation, his father's not his father's not dead. He's just making preparation. His father's probably old, maybe ailing, maybe very sick, right? But he maybe he is the one that feels responsible. Maybe he's the oldest son. And in the Eastern culture, and also Korean culture, we understand why that is so important. It's like it's like ingrained in us that if you're the oldest son, now if you're the oldest daughter, same kind of, if there's no son there, it's like if you're the oldest daughter, right? A lot of times it's the oldest, right? Oldest daughter, oldest son. There is this responsibility that's going to us here. But beyond culture, beyond tradition, all the kind of stuff here, we have to put Jesus first. A disciple is a learner or a student who attaches himself to a rabbi. And what does a rabbi mean? So the Ra means great one. The B means my. So my great one is a teacher or master or to a movement. Disciples were common at the time of Jesus. There's many disciples for, and they're all like looking for a master, looking for that rabbi, whatnot there. But another interesting thing about this is that a disciple, when they're following that rabbi here, they're actually saying, I want to follow his ways. I want to walk in his ways. I want to think like him. I want to talk like him. I want to live like him. So these disciples, once again, it was common in those days to understand that. Today here, I think we don't understand it well enough here, but I want to bring it back and I want us to understand why this is so important in our lives. You can have a heart to help others and have passion to make a difference for the world, your own personal way, right? But God is not looking to help others your way. God has a better way. He wants to know if you will follow him and follow his ways. Now we have to trust him. God's way is much, much better than our ways, much higher than our ways. If you will make Jesus number one above others for the rest of your life, here it is. You're going to make sacrifices. I mean, if you've been a Christian for some time, you will understand this. You're going to make sacrifices where, and basically, that one term, what would Jesus do? Um, what is pleasing to Jesus? What is not pleasing to Jesus? When you simply ask that question, you're gonna realize that you're going to make, if you you're gonna make sacrifices when you follow that, like, what's pleasing to Jesus here. You're gonna make sacrifices here. But then it's it gets. I think this one right here might even be harder than the one that's personal here because oftentimes we are, like, for example, I remember living in, when I was in college here, and, for example, food wise, um, I didn't mind eating, I didn't mind eating a 25 cents burrito. I don't know if they have those anymore, but back then they would have 25 cents burritos at the store, and I was just like, you know what? Hey, I could save a lot of money, and I could eat like a burrito and all that kind of stuff. So I remember doing that, and of course, it's not good for you, right? But it's just me, But once I got married, it was very different. It's like, like, I can't have my wife be eating a 25 cents burrito all the time there. So we, automatically we're making sacrifices. And before, I would be saving a lot of money because I wasn't a spender. I mean, I'm even now, I'm not necessarily a spender per se here, but that being said, now I'm married, I have kids, I'm taking care of my parents there. So, um, my spending is dependent on others. So I understand. I mean, many of us are like that. We would actually sacrifice a lot for our kids, for our parents, and whatnot. There. So this area might actually be harder. But guys, let's put Jesus first. This is where we have to trust in God, right? We got to trust that He has a better way, and and but that also means, though, that when you're trusting in Him, God has a better way. I remember, like, I remember, for example, here, like, I remember thinking, like, it would be nice to have a house. But what it really hit me here is that I realized that it would be best for my family to eventually have a house and rooms and restrooms and all that kind of stuff, right? So I remember praying to God. I said, God, I don't want to be selfish, but I believe that getting a house for the family, it could be a good thing. But I was praying to God, just asking Him, is this your desire? And actually, it came. I was very convicted that actually getting a house was actually it's something that I wanted. But the next part was how, and it was interesting that when my wife and I we went to go see a house. Um, and we were originally going to see this one house, but that house, that area, for some odd reason, was not open, I think. And so we went to this other, I guess, our second option. And we went over there, and oh man, it was amazing. And I remember sitting down. So, it's a brand new house. Sitting down in that couch in the, seeing the restroom. So it's like the living room. And I'm just, I'm just sitting there with my wife. And I just felt this was it. And I said, if there's a way, and we both felt peace about that. But I didn't think it was possible here. So the salesman came in, and then his name was Mike, by the way, very very nice guy. And he was just asking us like different kind of questions there. And I remember a question he asked me. He goes, hey, it looks like you really like this house. Um, do you would you like to explore getting this house? And I remember telling I go, Mike, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we could afford it. And then it was interesting. He just said, well, why don't we just try? Why don't we try there? And then to my amazement, we were able to get that. He said, why don't we just try here? And then there's why don't you put a deposit, and I said, how much? And he said, well, why don't you just put a deposit of $500? And I went, well, I can do that here, but I asked him, can I get that money back? And he goes, absolutely. If it doesn't work out, if you don't qualify, I just give the money back here. But if you do qualify, this is going to be a down payment towards your down payment for the house. So so we did that, and we got excited there. But we got even more excited when Mike called me and said, hey, you qualify, and it's like it's gonna take 6 months to build a house and all that kind of stuff. So just make sure that you have the down payment for that. And we were just ecstatic. It was just amazing there. So anyway, is Jesus number one above others? He has to be, guys. He has to be above you yourself. He has to be above others. If yes, Jesus welcomes you to follow Him. Okay, so let's actually go back to the story of the demon possessed man. I think this is a fascinating study. When was the demon possessed man saved? And this is from Mark chapter 5, verse 1 through 20. So he was physically saved when Jesus cast out the demon, verse 13. And you can see that right away when that happened, he realized that he was naked. So, they put clothes on him. He was in his right mind. And then he was sitting down. The herdsman, those people that was locals over there, and they saw everything, and they're freaking out and going, "What in the world?" So they run out, and they're telling people in their city, but they're telling the people in the country, verse 14, which means that they're telling the people all throughout Decapolis, the 10 cities. Now, talk about people that's just spreading the news, right? So this is causing people to actually see that. Talk about an impact event, right? It took time for the herdsmen with the people to come back, and I'm being very generous with this time of 4 hours. I mean, what I mean by that is that it probably took a lot longer than that. I think I'm being very conservative with that number, 4 hours. It probably took about maybe 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, maybe even more for them to you know, um, you know, would go out there and tell the people, and for them to start coming to Jesus there. What probably happened though is that as they're going around and talking to people, they're running to this place now, right? Now, between the time the herdsmen were away, this man was able to, and I believe this is what happened, was able to really hear the gospel, the good news to save him now, to save him spiritually, to save him, to truly save him, where now he is could be born again, to be a true Christian, right? So he understood and immediately accepted Jesus. He got so excited as accepted Jesus as Savior, who saved him, right? But he's also the king. He said, I'm going to make you my king for the rest of his life. But check this out, which also meant this. And the question is, when did the demon possessed man become a disciple? And I believe it was pretty instant there that he accepted that this meant being a disciple of Jesus. So here's what happened. And I think it wasn't that hard because he saw that his life was in shambles. Um, he counted the costs, and Jesus was greater than all. So think about this. He's putting Jesus on one side in a sense, and the other side, he's putting different kind of things. My own life. Oh yeah, Jesus is much greater than my own life. Other people. Yeah, Jesus is great, much greater than other people. All the things that applies for all the and he says, well, I'm just gonna put it all together. Yeah, Jesus is greater than everything that I have. He counted the costs and he said, you know what? Yeah, Jesus is great. I want to follow him. He felt it was natural to be a disciple of Jesus. So he immediately followed. He became a true disciple. Now notice over here, what I want you to understand, and it's important for us to understand this, is that you don't become a disciple just by going through a discipleship training program. No, that is an enhanced that's something for us to learn to be a disciple here. But then when you become a disciple is when you decide, you know what, I counted the cost, I'm going to follow Jesus here. When you follow Jesus, that's when you cross over and say, I'm going to be a true disciple. And I think many of you guys um, have faced that question in your life here. You know, some of us have counted the costs and said, yeah, um, Jesus is not greater. That's why I'm not saved yet. That's why I am not a born again Christian there. But think about this. If you count the cost and you're like, Jesus is greater than all, then not only are you saying, yeah, I want to be saved, but you're probably also saying that, yes, I want to be a follower of Jesus for the rest of my life. So he felt it was natural to be a disciple of Jesus. So he immediately followed and he became a true disciple right away, just like that. And he began to follow, he begged to follow Jesus. Verse 18. He's trying to get into the boat there, right? That is a true sign of salvation, by the way. So Jesus commanded his new disciple, this man right here. And once again, we don't even know this man's name. I think that's what's amazing is that there's many people in the Bible that we don't know their names, but they did some great, amazing things. And it just kind of shows you that a name is not as important as what they have done, you know, and what they're doing for God. What we know about is that this man was one time he was crazy. He was a demon possessed man. That was before Christ. He met Christ, accepted Christ, and now he's a new man. He is now a disciple. He's a new disciple, right? So Jesus commanded his new disciple to share the gospel to all. And if you read the story, basically it's saying, go and tell people about how merciful God was, how God saved you, and just really to tell your testimony. But also, I would also say to kind of, because he's understanding about the gospel, to share them about the gospel, meaning tell them about Jesus. Tell them what happened. And many times, I bet you when you're sharing your gospel, when you're sharing your testimony, you're talking about your experience with Jesus, your encounter with Jesus, right? And what he has done for you and how you are now, the after effect, how you were before and how you are now because of the encounter. So every one of us, if you think about that, our calendar is set BC before Christ and then AD during the time of Christ, right? So it's really interesting. We all have that encounter. So he followed Jesus and he told many. Verse 19 to 20 talks about that. Now, it is not, we are not for, uh, for sure that this individual led the people where where Jesus fed the 4,000. Remember now, he fed 5,000 people. This was for the Jewish people. The 4,000 is in Decapolis. So Jesus is actually coming here purposely, and now he's doing the same kind of thing, and it's something very similar, but he's now doing it for the Gentiles. He's doing it for people like us, right? The non-Jewish people, thank God, right? Um, Whether he led the people, I feel that most likely he did, but then regardless, he had a great influence. He was telling people, and we're not sure exactly how long that period from his salvation and his 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 conversion and discipleship. We're not sure about that time to the time that Jesus came here, but I think it's pretty short. I think it's within a year. So anyway, you'll see that in Mark chapter 8, verse 1 through 8 there. Let's talk about some other people that are examples of disciples. Peter, Andrew, they're two brothers. James and John, they're also two brothers. They were fishermen. We're told, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Wonderful story, right? Look at what they did. And they left their nets. They just dropped everything and immediately follow. That's an example of disciple, right? That they became a disciple right there. Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. Matthew, the tax collector, this is the one that actually wrote the Gospel of Matthew. Another name for Matthew was Levi. So Matthew, the tax collector, was told, follow me. And he left his high-paying job, rose, followed him. Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. It's interesting that when you read about his story of conversion, it's very short. It's just like, you see that. But then what happens afterwards is he throws a party, right? So, and then all the other tax collectors, he invites them, and now they're hearing directly from Jesus. So what he's doing is that he's naturally bringing people, his associates, and Jesus is just so happy to actually see this individual being converted, but also being a disciple. And right away, he does what a disciple does by bringing people to Jesus. Now, look at what look at what Philip does. Philip was told, follow me. And he followed. But look at what he does. He told Nathanael, John chapter 1, verse 43 to 45. Once again, it's natural as a disciple to share the gospel, pointing people to Jesus, not pointing to ourselves, not pointing them to a church, pointing them to Jesus. Now, naturally, what happens is that we're pointing them to Jesus, and we're like, and a lot of times we could say, you know what? Why don't you hear more about Jesus at our church? Like we have a Korean service at this time, we have an American service at this time, we have a Bible study here, we have a home church, we got a house church here. So all of that is pointing people to Jesus. Nathanael said to Jesus, and look at what it says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. We saw that, the wording last time with the demons saying you are the Son of God. Rabbi, you are the Son of God. Look at what it says. You are the King of Israel. These are both titles of Christ, the Messiah. And he followed. John chapter 1, verse 49. Follow is the key word to be a disciple. Are you going to follow? Now let's go to the next one right here. Interesting what the title says in Matthew chapter 28, verse 16 through 20. This is about the Great Commission. So the Great Commission is in many different Bibles, ESV, NIV, and NLT, NASB, the NKJV, right? The New Revised Standard Version actually says something very similar, but it says the commissioning. So that's an ongoing verb, right? So the commissioning of the disciple. So commission. A commission is a mandate or authoritative charge given by Jesus, who's God, Emmanuel, God with us, to true disciples to keep making true disciples and keep spreading the gospel around the world. This is a continuous action. We don't just make one disciple here. We don't just lead someone to we don't just stop with just one. We're constantly making true disciples. This is what our calling is. We're constantly spreading and sharing the gospel, constantly doing that. So it's a continuous action for the rest of our lives. It doesn't mean you have to be a pastor here, but you can do it everywhere. But remember, put Jesus first, and you'll be surprised of how God will give you opportunity after opportunity. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. So this is Matthew chapter 20, verse 16. In ministry, some who call themselves disciples don't last. Now, so isn't that interesting? We can call ourselves disciples, but we really have to weigh the costs, and we have to do this here properly here. When you actually study about the parable of the sower, you begin to see more clearly what it takes, and what kind of pitfalls there are, um, in our lives here. We have to go beyond that, and we're gonna eventually study that here. But um, you can't just, you can call yourself a disciple here, but you have to be a true disciple. These 11 disciples lasted because why? Because they were true disciples. They knew what it meant to be disciples. Jesus directed them to the mountain in Galilee, and they simply follow. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Now, this is a very interesting verse here. But I think it makes sense. We don't know which disciple doubted, but we all have times of doubt. What is important is these disciples kept their commitment. All of them remained faithful to Jesus. Many of them paid with their blood. In fact, all 11 of these guys paid with they became committed all the way to the end. And some of them actually were crucified, just like what Jesus was here. We are so thankful for these ordinary men who became extraordinary. Praise God for them. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Now the Great Commission is coming here. Jesus, our gracious and merciful Savior and King, reminds us that all the authority in the entire universe belongs to him. Remember, he's the one that made it. Now he appoints only those that are his true disciples, that his authority will go with them. So this is not just for anybody. This is for disciples. People who are truly saved by Jesus naturally become a true disciple of Jesus. So here's a great commission. Go, therefore, and make disciples. It doesn't say go, therefore, and make a convert. No. It says go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. For the true disciple, Jesus mandates and commands them to make disciples. Then he explains once a person becomes a true disciple of Jesus, he or she is to be baptized to proclaim publicly they are a disciple, not just saved. So it's important for us to get that information. It's important for us to understand that. Teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. So this is the first part of verse 20. So Jesus gives the next step for these true disciples. So these are his 11, right? Of course, they're going to make more and more, right? So these true disciples, they're the mentors to continue to continuously teach of all that Jesus commanded to the new true disciples. These are the mentees, and it's a continuous, ongoing cycle everywhere. By example and by giving them opportunities to practice the teaching of Jesus, which is the same as following the will of God. Why? Because Jesus is God with us, right? Emmanuel. This is the beautiful model of the true church that Jesus wants, and I truly believe that. The true church is filled with true disciples. So let's go to the conclusion here. So let me conclude with this last part. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So he concludes with this. As Jesus casts this vision to these faithful true disciples, he's casting this vision called the Great Commission to as many true disciples around the world. He tells them he will be with all true disciples always until the end of this age. People are becoming true disciples everywhere. So here's my question to you. Are you a true disciple? If so, why? If not, why not? Let me leave you with that here. And I pray that you guys have a great week. And I look forward to talking to you again.